This email is from Jeannie. I don't know how long I've had this, maybe a while. But it's a great story. Actually, someone else has read this, a friend of mine, and she told me, she said, I can't wait to hear this on the podcast because it's so good. She enjoys the stories where people get lost, and it's kind of intriguing to her. So here it is. It's a really good story. It was a Saturday morning in February 2015. My husband and I decided to take a day trip to Lake Pleasant, which is northwest of Phoenix, Arizona. We had purchased a very nice Ram Power Wagon not long before, so we thought we would take it for a nice ride and have a picnic. We arrived at the lake, rode around and checked out a few different areas, and at about 2 p.m. we found a nice area and decided to have our lunch. As we were eating and enjoying the view, we got to talking about a place called Crown King that we thought wasn't too far away. We had always wanted to visit, but had never made it there. We had been members of a four-wheel drive group a few years back that had planned a couple of trips to Crown King, but seemed it wasn't meant to be. A brush fire had stopped one of the trips, and I don't recall what stopped the other. After we ate, we decided to do a bit more exploring. As we were driving down a not-so-good dirt road, we saw a sign that read Crown King. We knew it was the back way in, and we agreed to check it out. We set the GPS and headed into what was for us unknown territory. This was around 3:30 in the afternoon. We noticed that we were the only ones headed in the direction that we were going. There were several off-road vehicles going the opposite direction, and we noticed that they were traveling at a high rate of speed. It was like they had to be out of the area before dark. We thought that seemed rather bizarre. We crossed a small, muddy wash, and at the time neither of us said anything. Thinking back, it was very strange because both of us had seen something on each side of the truck. Why we didn't mention it or stop to take pictures, we still can't figure out. There were huge footprints in the mud. They were well over a foot long and at least 7 inches wide. The tracks were very clear, even the toe prints were visible. By now we had traveled quite a way. GPS was still telling us that we were on track, but the not-so-good road was getting much worse. We went through a narrow area with dry brush on each side. My husband shed a few tears as we heard that dry brush scraping down the sides of that new power wagon. We had definitely given it what we call the Arizona pinstripes. It was starting to get dark, but there was no sign of our destination. We had only brought enough food for our picnic, and all that was gone. The original plan for the day was to check out Lake Pleasant, have our picnic, and after a bit more sightseeing, we'd plan to stop at a restaurant somewhere on the way home. That wasn't happening. By now, all we had was a half a bottle of water and about a half tank of gas in the Ram. We were watching the GPS closely now. It showed our destination was just a few more miles. We were so happy. It was late and we were hungry and neither of us had been to the restroom in hours. We hadn't seen anyone since before dark, and as I mentioned, they weren't going our way. Finally, the GPS said, "You've reached your destination." It was the most lonely, lost feeling as we topped a hill to what we thought would be Crown King, only to find dead bushes and trees and nothing else. GPS was worthless. We were, for the first time in our lives, lost. We kept going, trying to find our way out and back to civilization because there was no turning back. We were getting low on gas and had made so many turns we wouldn't know which road would take us back to the lake. We were counting on the way out, if we could find it, being closer than the route we'd taken. But where was it? We took a different service road that looked promising, but they either came to a dead end or they led us to another road. We had entered into an area where there were pine trees now. We were not real happy at this point, and we were still lost. We had our half bottle of water, but not knowing how long it would be before we got out of there, we saved it. Plus, we needed to use the restroom, but it was so pitch dark out there, we weren't about to get out of the truck. We were driving down the dirt road with our brights illuminating both the road in front of us and some area into the pines at our sides. We rounded a slight curve, and what we saw will be etched in our minds forever. This took place in 2015, but the memory is as vivid today as if it happened last night. It was now, by the way, that we decided to tell each other about the large tracks that we had both seen earlier but had failed to mention. Sitting on the ground, kind of behind a tree, and not a small pine tree, mind you, was an ape-like figure. We could see half of its back and its arm, and part of its right thigh. It seemed to have its legs pulled up against its body. We could also see the right side of its head. The part of its shoulder that we could see stuck out from the tree about 2 feet. Sitting on the ground, it seemed to be from ground to the top of its head as tall as me, and I'm 5 foot 5 inches tall. I couldn't tell how muscular it might or might not have been, but it was well filled out and very big. We got closer, and it turned its head more to the left away from us. It had silver gray hair that looked about the same length all over. Because of the gray, we thought it might have been older. There was no mistaking what it was. These lights were bright, and we were only about 25 feet away. We drove on. There was no way we were going to stop for a better look or pictures. I'm pretty sure we were both in shock. We just kept moving on down the road about a mile, with the AC on, the noise of the truck engine, and the radio turned up. All of a sudden, above all the noise we were making, there was this indescribably loud grunting roar. It was unforgettable. It was the type of sound that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. We didn't slow down, we just kept driving, but now it was around midnight. We had yet to find our destination, and we really weren't caring now. We just wanted to find the highway. We wanted to find civilization. Finally, a bit after 1 a.m., we saw a small settlement. It was just a few houses. Oddly, at roughly 1:20 a.m., every house had what appeared to be every light on. We remarked on how peculiar that was. About 10 minutes after that, we finally found a highway, and a few miles later, we found a place to eat. We were in such a state of shock that all we could do was sit there and try to process what we had seen. It occurred to us that we had been lost for almost 10 hours. The next day, I looked up Bigfoot sightings around the Prescott-Crown King area. I read several posts and stories. One of the posts said, if there have been Bigfoot sightings near your home, leave all your lights on all night, and they won't come into your area. Could this possibly be why the little settlement had all the lights on? We have since wanted to go back in the daylight to check out where we had seen it. We haven't as of yet. We don't really tell this to very many people. You know, all those weird you've lost it looks you get. However, my husband and I know what we saw. We have always been believers in Bigfoot, and now, beyond a doubt, we know they exist. They are out there, and thank you for reading my story. Signed, Jeannie. Jeannie, you're welcome for reading your story. It was a spectacular story, and I know everyone loved it. And I agree with my co-reader. I guess that's what I would call her. She read through this and thought it was a wonderful story, and I agree. Man, I'm glad she recommended I put this up on a video because, you know, this just puts it all in the box. I mean, people who actually believe in Bigfoot and then see one, in one way, it's got to be a good feeling, and then in another way, you know, it's got to be terrifying when you actually see one. the whole thing is intriguing to me, and that's northwest of Phoenix, Arizona. Crown King area. I don't know how many people that listen are out there. Maybe someone else has had an encounter in that area. I don't recall the Crown King word. It's not coming up in my memory, but I've done so many stories it may have, but I don't think I've heard that word before. So if you've had an encounter in Crown King, send me an email. Let me know. All right, just one story for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.